A woman crossing the village square of Ilara stopped mid-step. Her hands began to tremble. Dark sores erupted across her skin in seconds, spreading from her wrists toward her neck, and she collapsed to the red laterite ground, screaming. "She's got the marks," someone shouted. "Everyone back!" The square scattered, mothers dragging children by the wrist. Market stalls overturned in the rush, cowrie beads scattering underfoot. 2 more villagers near the well were already clutching at their own arms, sores rising beneath their fingers in the same unnatural seconds. By the time the dust settled over the empty square, 3 separate households had gone quiet behind shuttered doors, and no one still standing wanted to be the one to check on them first. In her healing hut, Martha pressed cool cloths to 3 more of the sick laid out across woven mats as the elder Samuel rushed in, out of breath. 4 more since sunrise, he told her. "This isn't the sickness season brings, Martha. This is something else." Martha didn't look up from her work. "Every fever has a cause. Fetch me more bitter leaf and don't waste breath on omens." Samuel pressed anyway, lowering his voice. It started the same week the king tore down the roadside shrine. "You know whose shrine that was." Martha's hands went still over the cloth for exactly 1 beat. "Say his name quietly in this hut," she said. "The sick don't need to hear it. Neither do I." She took the warning to the palace anyway, crossing the open courtyard beneath its carved wooden pillars. King Nathaniel barely looked up from his low stool. "7 dead since the new moon, Your Majesty," Martha told him. 11 more marked. It began the week you had the roadside shrine pulled down. Nathaniel waved it off without standing. Bad water, not bad gods. Nothing a king needed to trouble himself with. Martha asked only that he rebuild the shrine, just to be careful, just in case. His answer came sharper than the question deserved. "It costs me the look of a king who kneels to something he cannot see," he said, rising now, done with her. "Go treat your patients, healer. Leave governing to me." 6 days passed, and the village unraveled by the door. The square went half empty, cloth strips tied to door frames marking which compounds held the sick. A trader who once sold the loudest in the market sat silent behind an empty stall, sores climbing his forearms. Martha walked the strips one by one, counting under her breath, and stopped at a door where a child's single sandal had been left outside, unclaimed by anyone still well enough to bring it in. "Bitter leaf isn't touching this," she admitted to no one. "Nothing I have is touching this." That night she walked past the last standing compounds to what remained of the shrine. Scattered stones, broken palm frond posts half swallowed by grass, and knelt to rebuild a rough circle with her own hands. "I don't know the right words," she said into the empty clearing. "I only know my patients are dying and my king won't listen. If you're real, if any of this is real, I'm asking, not commanding. Come and tell me what you want." The forest around her went unnaturally still, every insect and nightbird silenced at once. The air began to smell of ash and palm oil. Sonponna rose out of the tree line, wrapped head to foot in palm fronds and rough sackcloth, only his eyes visible through the covering, a short broom of dried grass held loosely in one hand. Where the wrapping shifted at his wrists, the skin beneath looked scarred rather than healed, old wounds that had never been allowed to close properly. "You're the first person from that village to ask instead of run," he told her. "Most run." Martha asked him directly whether he was the one doing this. "I'm the sickness healer," he said, each word slow and dry. "I have been since the other Orisha looked at what 400 years of being unwanted did to my skin and decided I was better left outside their gatherings." Martha didn't flinch. "That's not an answer. That's a wound." "I asked if you're doing this to my village." Sonponna told her the truth plainly, circling the broken stones as he spoke. Her king had torn down the one place he was still welcome. He hadn't started this to punish her village. He'd started it because disease was the only language anyone still listened to from him anymore. Martha pushed back, standing her ground in the clearing, Her patience hadn't torn down his shrine. A prideful man in a palace had alone, and should answer for it alone. Sonponna reminded her that disease doesn't know how to be that precise. That's rather the point of them, he said. Martha held firm anyway. Then be more than a disease. You said healing and sickness were the same hand. Prove it. Spare my village, and I will personally make sure the king answers to you for what he did. Sonponna set his terms, writing the last of the fallen stones with the end of his broom. Rebuild the shrine properly, keep the festival every year without fail, and the king faces him himself, not a healer standing in for him. Agreed to that, and the sickness would lift from everyone but the king by morning. Martha agreed without hesitating. By dawn, it was already working. A sick man sat up on his mat outside a half-open door as his wife burst into relieved tears beside him. Look, it's leaving. It's actually leaving. Samuel jogged up to Martha across the square, breathless and hopeful, every house on the row already clearing, cloth strips coming down one by one. Martha didn't celebrate yet. It's not finished, she told him. Someone still has to answer for how it started. That someone woke in the palace that same morning to find the first dark sore rising on his own forearm, exactly where a healer's warning had gone unheeded 6 days before. King Nathaniel scrambled up in a panic, screaming for the healer, promising to pay whatever price she named, guards flooding into the room around him. One young guard in the doorway didn't move to help him, just stared, afraid to come closer. Your Majesty, he said, it's already spreading to your neck. Word of it traveled faster than the sickness ever had. Within days, every trader passing through Ilara carried the same story to the next kingdom down the river, of a king who mocked a shrine and woke up wearing the same marks he'd dismissed as bad water. Neighboring rulers who had let their own roadside offerings fall into neglect quietly sent workers out to repair them before the rains came again. One chief 3 villages downriver was said to have rebuilt his own shrine at midnight, alone, so no one would see a ruler admit he'd been afraid of the same thing he'd once mocked. Weeks later, the shrine at Ilara stood rebuilt, fresh palm frond posts driven into the earth, offerings of grain and palm oil laid out at its base every new moon without fail. Martha tended it now as its caretaker, her healing hut still open but her mornings starting here instead. A young girl watched her lay out the day's offering and asked why anyone still fed a god who had made people sick. Martha didn't look up from her work. Because the ones we're afraid of are usually just the ones we forgot to thank, she said. Feed the fear properly, and most of the time it stops needing to be feared. Deep in the tree line behind the rebuilt shrine, barely visible in the shifting light, a palm frond silhouette watched the offering being made, still unmoving, present without needing to announce himself anymore. The god of disease and of healing finally remembered the way he'd always wanted to be, not with fear carried at a distance, but with a plate set out unprompted by someone who no longer needed reminding. Above the shrine, the palm branches stirred once in a wind that touched nothing else in the clearing, and then went still again, the closest thing to a thank you a god like him had left to